Derek thought he had everything he ever wanted, until he discovered that the man he had called his husband for 15 years, Ryan, had been living a double life. As a respected pastor, Ryan's betrayal was even more shocking. In a devastating twist, Derek uncovered that Ryan had another family in Texas, one he had hidden for years. What followed was a journey of heartbreak, lies, and the painful unraveling of a marriage that seemed unbreakable. This is the story of how Derek's world came crashing down, revealing a truth so devastating, it changed everything he thought he knew about love and trust. For 15 years, Derek and Ryan had built what seemed like an ideal life together. They had met in their early 20s and instantly clicked. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and by the time they were in their 30s, they were inseparable. Derek was a successful lawyer, known for his sharp mind and calm demeanor in court. Ryan, on the other hand, had a more public persona. As a well-respected pastor in their community, he was admired for his humility and dedication to his faith. Together, they were the perfect couple, always seen attending charity events, family gatherings, and church functions. Their friends often marveled at how well they complemented each other. Derek was grounded and pragmatic, while Ryan was more emotionally attuned, always the one to lend an ear to those in need. They had bought a beautiful home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, surrounded by friends and a tight-knit church community. To the outside world, their marriage seemed picture-perfect. People admired how they had maintained such a loving relationship over the years, especially in a world where many marriages faltered. They had built their lives on mutual respect, trust, and a shared faith in one another. Family gatherings, church services, and vacations were all integral parts of their relationship. Derek never questioned Ryan's commitment, nor did he feel any sense of doubt about their bond. Ryan's role as a pastor often took him away on trips, but Derek understood. It was part of Ryan's calling, and he supported it wholeheartedly. But beneath the surface, there were small moments that Derek began to notice, though he never gave them much thought at the time. Ryan was often distant after certain trips, seeming more distracted and less present when he returned. His explanations for these absences were always vague: a church conference here, a retreat there. When Derek asked for specifics, Ryan would say it wasn't important, that he'd been doing things that were part of his pastoral duties. But in hindsight, those moments of unease were like cracks in an otherwise solid foundation. Derek ignored them, trusting his husband without question. After all, they had been together for years. He had no reason to believe that Ryan, the man he had built his life around, would betray him. One evening, after a long day at work, Derek returned home to find Ryan's phone buzzing incessantly on the kitchen counter. Ryan was in the other room, preparing dinner, and Derek, feeling the sudden urge to check, picked it up. The name on the screen was unfamiliar, but what caught his eye were the messages, a series of texts from someone named Laura. The messages seemed cordial at first, but as Derek scrolled further, they became more intimate, filled with references to home and the kids, and discussions about a future visit. Derek's heart began to race as a knot formed in his stomach. Who was Laura? Why was Ryan texting her in such a personal way? He quickly set the phone back down, his mind racing. He told himself it was nothing, just a misunderstanding, but the seed of doubt had been planted. For days after that, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Ryan was still the same, charming, loving, and attentive, but there was an undercurrent of tension between them that Derek couldn't ignore. He tried to push aside the nagging feeling, but the question of Laura kept resurfacing. Who was she? Why didn't Ryan mention her? What did these texts mean? That night, Derek couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, the image of the phone screen flashing in his mind. He knew he had to get to the bottom of it. Something inside him told him that the life they had built together was not as perfect as it seemed, but he didn't want to believe it. Still, the questions kept coming, And soon, Derek would be forced to face a truth that would change everything. The next few days were a blur for Derek. He tried to carry on as usual, focusing on his work and keeping up with his social obligations, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. Every time he looked at Ryan, a sense of doubt settled in his chest. He couldn't stop thinking about the messages on Ryan's phone, the intimacy and the texts that felt so out of place. Ryan had always been open about his work, about his friendships, so why had he hidden this one? The feeling of betrayal began to take root. Derek decided to take matters into his own hands. He knew it wasn't like him to be paranoid, but the more he thought about it, the more things didn't add up. Ryan's trips to Texas had become more frequent over the past year. Derek had never questioned it before. After all, Ryan had always been deeply involved in his church ministry, and he often mentioned conferences, retreats, and meetings with other pastors. But as Derek reflected, he realized Ryan had never given specifics about these trips. Whenever he asked, Ryan would offer vague answers. It had always seemed like there was something more, something Ryan was holding back, but Derek had been too trusting to press him on it. One evening, while Ryan was out running errands, Derek sat down at the computer and began searching for any mention of Ryan's trips to Texas. He tried using different search terms, hoping to find something that would explain the growing pit in his stomach. Then, he stumbled upon something. A series of online posts and news articles about a church in Texas that Ryan had never mentioned. It was a large congregation in a small town just outside of Dallas. What caught Derek's eye, though, was a photo of a family on the church's website. The man in the photo was unmistakable. It was Ryan, but this time he was standing next to a woman and two children, smiling with his arm around them. Derek's heart skipped a beat. How had he never heard about this? The photo was clearly recent, and Derek couldn't understand how he hadn't known about this other family. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Was this some sort of mistake? A coincidence? But as he clicked through the church's website, more photos appeared, showing Ryan at various church events with the same woman and children. Derek felt sick to his stomach. This wasn't just a distant connection. This was Ryan's life in Texas, a life that he had kept completely hidden from Derek. At that moment, Derek's world tilted. He realized that the man he had spent the past 15 years with had been leading a double life. There was no other explanation. His husband had another family, one that Derek had never been told about. The shock was overwhelming. How could Ryan have kept this from him? How could he have been so deceitful? Derek felt a deep sense of betrayal that seemed impossible to comprehend. The questions flooded his mind. Had Ryan been seeing this woman for years? Was he living two lives, pretending to be a devoted husband to Derek while playing the role of a father to children that weren't his? Derek's hands trembled as he sat back in his chair, trying to process everything he had just uncovered. He had trusted Ryan completely, never questioning him, never suspecting that anything was wrong. Now, the perfect life he thought they shared seemed to be crumbling before his eyes. Derek knew he couldn't ignore this any longer. He had to confront Ryan. There was no other choice, but the thought of what he might hear, the answers he might get, terrified him. What would Ryan say? Would he try to explain it away, or would he admit to the truth? The truth that Derek was not the only one who had been lied to for all these years. As Derek stared at the photo of Ryan with his other family, he felt the weight of his decision. He had to confront the man he had loved and trusted, but he also knew that this conversation would change everything. The life they had built, the marriage they had fought for, was about to unravel, and there was no way to put it back together again. The confrontation came sooner than Derek had anticipated. He couldn't keep the truth inside any longer. The discovery was eating away at him, and the pressure of knowing that Ryan had kept such a monumental secret was too much to bear. As Ryan walked through the door that evening, tired from a long day, Derek was already sitting at the kitchen table, the photo of Ryan with his other family open on his phone. His heart raced, but he knew he had to face the truth. He had to know why Ryan had done this. Ryan looked up, surprised to see Derek so serious. He immediately put down his bag, sensing something was off. Derek didn't waste any time. He slid the phone across the table toward Ryan, his fingers trembling with anticipation. Ryan glanced at the screen, and his expression faltered, his face paling, as he recognized the photo of himself with the woman and children in Texas. "Where were you?" Derek asked, his voice a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "What is this, Ryan? How could you keep this from me? For all these years you've been lying to me about where you've been, about who you've been with." Ryan opened his mouth to speak but hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. He looked at the photo, then back at Derek as if trying to gather himself. His face was etched with guilt, and for the first time Derek could see the cracks in the facade he had worked so hard to maintain. I didn't want you to find out this way," Ryan said, his voice low and shaky. "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could keep it separate. I thought I could keep you both in my life without anyone knowing." Derek felt his chest tighten. "You thought you could keep me in the dark? You thought I wouldn't find out? For how long, Ryan? How long have you been living this double life?" Ryan sank into the chair across from Derek, running his hands through his hair, looking defeated. "It started before we were married, Derek," he confessed, his voice heavy with regret. "I met Laura when I was in Texas for a church conference. We connected. I never meant for it to happen. I didn't plan for it to go this far, but it did." Derek could hardly breathe. His mind raced as he processed Ryan's words. For all these years, while they had been building a life together, Ryan had been seeing someone else. And not just anyone. Someone he had started a family with. Derek's world tilted as the pieces of the puzzle clicked together. All those business trips to Texas, all the vague explanations, all the time Ryan spent away from home. It had all been a lie. Ryan had been leading a second life, one that Derek had never been a part of. Ryan continued, his voice breaking. "It was supposed to be temporary, just a fling. But then Laura got pregnant, and then we had a child. And then another. I didn't know what to do. I was torn, Derek. I couldn't leave you. I didn't want to hurt you. But I couldn't walk away from them either. I thought I could balance it. But it became too much. And the guilt, Derek, it ate at me every day. I hated myself for it." Derek could hardly hold back his tears. The man he had trusted more than anyone had shattered everything. He had spent years giving his heart to someone who, unbeknownst to him, was living a secret life. The love they had shared, the life they had built, it had all been built on lies. Derek had always believed that their relationship was solid, that they had something real, something unbreakable, but now, he realized how fragile it all truly was. "What about the church?" Derek asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were a pastor, Ryan. How could you preach about honesty, about integrity, when you were lying to me and everyone around you?" Ryan's face crumpled with shame. "I never wanted anyone to know. I thought if I kept it hidden it wouldn't hurt anyone. I thought I could keep them separate, my two worlds, but it didn't work. It was a mistake, Derek, and I know I can't fix it. I never should have done this to you." Derek stood up, pacing the room as anger and sorrow washed over him. "You've destroyed everything, Ryan. You've destroyed me. I gave you everything, my trust, my love, and you took that and threw it away for someone else. You've been lying to me, to everyone. And for what?" Ryan didn't answer, his head hanging low in shame. He knew that no words could fix the damage he had caused. Derek couldn't bear to look at him any longer. The man he had loved, the man he had built his life with, was a stranger to him now. The betrayal was too deep to reconcile. Ryan had created a web of lies so tangled that no amount of regret could undo the harm he had caused. With a heavy heart, Derek turned and walked out of the room. He knew this was the end of their marriage, the end of everything they had shared. But in that moment he also realized that this was the beginning of a new chapter in his life. A chapter where he would have to rebuild, to find peace, and to learn to trust again. The days following the confrontation were a blur for Derek. He had moved out of the house they had shared, taking only the essentials with him: clothes, a few personal items, and the weight of the broken trust that now hung around him like a shadow. He stayed with a close friend for the time being, unsure of where to go or what to do next. His entire world had been turned upside down, and he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that gnawed at him constantly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ryan's face, the man who had promised to love him for better or worse, the man who had shattered their life together in a single devastating revelation. Ryan's apologies continued to pour in. He called, sent texts, and even wrote long, heartfelt letters trying to explain himself. But Derek couldn't bring himself to respond. There was nothing left to say. The person he had known, the person he had trusted, was no longer the man he had married. Ryan's confessions felt like nothing more than an attempt to ease his own guilt. But they couldn't undo the damage that had been done. Derek was no longer interested in hearing excuses. He needed answers. But more than that, he needed space to breathe, to process the wreckage of his life. Ryan had told him everything, but Derek still couldn't piece it all together. How could someone, especially someone so respected in their community, live such a double life? How could Ryan preach about integrity, honesty, and faith while hiding the truth from the very people who trusted him? The more Derek thought about it, the more the questions piled up. Why had Ryan married him in the first place if he had never truly been committed? What was the point of all those years of affection, of promises, if Ryan had been lying from the start? And the children. How had Ryan gone so long without telling Derek that he had another family? The idea of it all was too overwhelming, too painful to comprehend. But amidst the turmoil, Derek knew he had to face the inevitable. He had to move on. His life was no longer the one he had imagined. He couldn't go back to a marriage built on lies. He had loved Ryan and he had believed in their life together. But now, that life was gone. All that was left were the shattered pieces of a marriage that had once felt unbreakable. Derek began the process of filing for divorce. He met with a lawyer to discuss the legalities, but the emotional weight of it all was unbearable. Every meeting, every document he had to sign, was a reminder of the betrayal that had fractured his entire sense of self. The divorce was a necessary step, but it felt like a death. The life they had planned together, the future they had dreamed of, had evaporated into nothing. As the weeks passed, Derek withdrew further into himself. He stopped going to social events, avoided mutual friends, and spent most of his time alone, trying to come to terms with the fact that the man he had trusted so completely had lied to him for over a decade. The world outside continued on, but Derek felt like he was trapped in a storm, unable to find his footing. Every time he saw a couple together, every time he heard a pastor's sermon or a story about a happy family, he felt the weight of his own brokenness. Ryan, meanwhile, was left to pick up the pieces of his own life. His church, once a place where he was revered, turned against him. The elders were shocked when they learned the truth about his secret family, and they demanded his resignation. Ryan's reputation, once built on years of hard work and dedication, was destroyed in an instant. The congregation that had trusted him felt betrayed, just as Derek had. The fallout was swift and unforgiving, and Ryan found himself alone in a way he had never experienced. His relationship with his children in Texas became strained as well. What had once been a secret life of joy now seemed like a web of lies that he couldn't untangle. He tried to repair his relationship with Laura and the children, but it was too late. The damage had been done, and their trust had been shattered, just like Derek's. Derek tried to move forward, but the scars were deep. He spent hours at the gym, trying to clear his head, or lost himself in books, trying to escape the haunting thoughts of his past. Slowly, he started to rebuild his life. He made new friends, focused on his career, and took up hobbies he had abandoned over the years. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Derek knew that in order to heal, he had to distance himself from everything that reminded him of the life he had lost. He still couldn't understand how Ryan could do what he had done. The betrayal was still raw, and the idea of trusting anyone again seemed impossible. But Derek also knew that he couldn't let this break him. He wouldn't let the actions of one person define his future. Ryan had taken away the life they had built, but Derek would find a way to rebuild his own. He didn't know what the future held, but he was determined to find peace again. It would take time, but he was ready to begin the long, painful journey of healing. Months passed, and Derek slowly began to reclaim his life piece by painful piece. The road to recovery wasn't easy. He still had moments where the memories of his marriage to Ryan overwhelmed him. Times when he would sit alone, staring at the empty space beside him on the couch, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. But with each day, he found himself growing stronger, more focused on rebuilding his future. The betrayal still stung, but Derek had started to realize that while he couldn't change the past, he could shape his own future. He focused more on his career, finding solace in the work that had once been his passion. He took on more cases, moved into a smaller apartment, and started spending time with old friends. Derek didn't need to rush into anything. He had learned the hard way not to place his happiness in someone else's hands. His friends were a source of comfort, offering him the love and support that Ryan had failed to provide. And for the first time in years, Derek began to understand what it meant to love himself again. The divorce process was long and emotionally exhausting, but Derek was determined to see it through. Ryan had tried to reach out to him multiple times, sending messages of apology and remorse, but Derek had ignored every attempt. There was nothing left to say. Ryan's actions had made it clear that he was not the man Derek had thought him to be. The trust between them had been irrevocably broken. Still, there were moments when Derek couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for what could have been. He had once believed that he and Ryan would grow old together, that they would continue building their life side by side. The idea of a future with someone who loved and respected him seemed impossible now. But with each passing day, Derek found peace in the realization that he wasn't defined by his failed marriage. He was defined by his strength to move forward, to keep going, even when the world around him seemed to fall apart. As for Ryan, his life had unraveled just as quickly as Derek's had. The church, which had once been his pillar of strength and support, had distanced itself from him completely. His congregation felt betrayed, and the accusations against him were too much to bear. Ryan tried to salvage his relationship with Laura and the children, but it was evident that his actions had irreparably damaged their bond. The guilt he carried weighed heavily on him, but it was a weight that seemed impossible to shed. Ryan spent months in isolation, trying to reconcile the man he had been with the man he had become. He had lost everything: his family, his career, and the trust of the people he had once called friends. His attempts to reach out to Derek were met with silence, and though he regretted his choices deeply, he knew that it was too late to make amends. For Derek, the closure came in quiet moments. One evening, as he was walking through the park, he stopped at a bench reflecting on everything that had transpired. He thought about the man he had loved, the man he had trusted, and the years they had spent together. It hurt, but it also felt like a weight was lifting from his shoulders. Derek had come to understand that closure wasn't something Ryan could give him. It was something he had to give to himself. Eventually, Derek found the courage to open his heart again, but he did so with caution. Trust was no longer something he took for granted, and he knew that building a relationship would take time. He wasn't in a rush to jump into anything. Instead, he focused on his own growth, finding joy in the small moments of life. He had rediscovered hobbies he had long forgotten, enjoyed the companionship of his friends, and started to explore new possibilities. Though the pain of the past still lingered, Derek knew that he had emerged from it stronger than he had been before. The scars would always be there, reminders of the betrayal and the loss, but they no longer defined him. Derek had survived the storm, and now he was ready to embrace whatever came next. With the lessons of the past behind him, he had a future waiting to be built, a future that was his own, one where he could finally find peace and happiness again.